but we really didn't address sensory, which is what the parents were asking for in the first place. Like, did
Hmm.
we or did we not? Like, that seems like a pretty easy question, kind of filtering that out too. So that's a bummer because I think that the director put this staff member in a really hard spot, right? Because now
Yeah.
we're sitting here looking at it going, well, maybe they're incompetent.
Yeah. Welcome to Spedsplaining, where special education gets decoded one case at a time. I'm Stefan, a former classroom teacher and current instructional coach, and I'm joined by three brilliant minds in special education, Darcy, Anna, and Leanne. Each week, they take real stories, often from right here in Washington, and break them down into plain language. We use these stories as a launch pad to explore the wild, wonderful, and sometimes frustrating world of general and special education. Whether you're an educator, parent, advocate, or just curious about how the system really works, we've got you. Let's dive in.
Okay. So I chose this case because it interested me along the lines of it involves sensory motor and services under sensory motor. And I supervise a lot of occupational therapists, and even my physical therapists are pretty interested in sensory motor and what that looks like for an IEP.
I
I
literally
bet
called you with a sensory motor question yesterday.
you did. It comes up a lot. And one of the reasons why it comes up a lot is because it's so undefined, I would say, in the IEP WAC process land. I bet Stefan's going, what is that? But maybe not.
Well, when you said OTPT, that gave me an idea.
I mean, also, we had our own child that received sensory motor services for almost 3 years. So you should kind of know.
I don't pay attention as a parent. You know that. That was also my other filter, wondering if that was it. I think I do. I think I know it's, but I couldn't define it. So someone define sensory motor for me, or give me an example.
I mean, I don't feel qualified at all to give like a really great definition or anything, but I could say that all human beings have some sensory stimulus issues. So we might be overstimulated by sound or by smells or by all sorts of different input, or we might be understimulated sometimes, and we have to have things a little bit
yesterday, 2 days ago, our 3-year-old was like spiraling, and Anna had him on the stairs, and she was just screaming at. No, she was like doing like deep pressure, like squeezes, or something that we used to do with our oldest, as a way of like sensory input, right? So now I'm thinking about our oldest son's original OT, or his OG OT, you might say. And that was funny. No one laughed for a second. I was like, that was a really good
I rolled
one.
my eyes quite loudly. I'm surprised you didn't hear that.
So just talking about different things that we did with him at home in terms of like providing sensory input before bed by using this little like plastic like brushes on his skin, and deep like joint pressure, like those types of things. And that was the idea was it was helping him like regulate and okay. All right. That does help.
Yeah. Thank you. So when little people have sensory regulation issues, like they're going to be dysregulated. So sometimes you can create, an OT might create like a sensory routine that a teacher can have available for a student to help them get more regulated so that they can be in their learning brain, right? Because when they're not regulated, they're not going to be able to pick up new skills. So it is important to education. This case, though, kind of didn't get past the point that I thought it was going to. But we'll start. So there was an evaluation done on a third grader. and they did include an OT evaluation. The OT did do a sensory processing rating scale, which is really the only test that we have available out there, as far as like standardized tests go. And that usually means sending a rating scale to the teacher, sending a rating scale to the parents, and then getting those back and looking at what's the profile of the student's sensory, either being understimulated or overstimulated by certain sensory input. And like often happens, there was a big discrepancy between what the school rated versus what the parent rated, which is not unusual. Very different environments, very different demands. Also, maybe the teacher might have some strategies already in place that the parent doesn't, or vice versa.
Yeah,
I saw a question coming.
Yeah. Just as you said, those sensory processing, just because again, with our own son, that's kind of my only, it's helpful to actually have that, because otherwise I'd have zero idea of what this looks like. But I remember Anna and I sitting down and filling that out together, or more likely Anna probably filled it out and then I looked at it and was like, yeah, that sounds about right. And
exactly what happened.
My first thought is, this doesn't seem very scientific. Again, we were talking about our son probably when he was, was he wasn't 2 or 3?
Yeah, he wasn't 3 yet.
And so you're constantly battling. I mean, 3rd grade, obviously a little bit older, but you're constantly battling is just this typical developmental stuff. Like, we don't know, like, despite having our background education, we don't know this early learning stuff. Every kid's different, whatever. And that, my big issue with some of this stuff, it's all self-reporting. It just doesn't seem very scientific. And so it seems like you're opening yourself up for a fight, because, I mean, how often do you hear this as a teacher? Like, well, he doesn't do that at home, or she doesn't do that at home, or this is the way it's home. Well, I'm not seeing that in the classroom, so what am I supposed to do about that? I feel like we've talked about that type of stuff before, of just the discrepancies between homes. So yeah, I guess I could see trouble brewing if I'm going to make a guess that it's a student whose parents are advocating to get this kid services to address a sensory processing disorder, and the school's like, we just don't see the need here. That's my prediction.
The child did end up having a diagnosis of autism, which is often comorbidity there. Like, you'll have one or the other first, but sensory processing is often a part of autism, just like having a communication delay can be a part of autism. So the child qualified. It was more disagreement about the OT evaluation. So yeah, what you're saying with these rating scales, I mean, there's science in the fact that there's standardized questions and the responses have all been like put through that testing process, but it's still subjective, and it has a lot to do with people's perception, their background knowledge about sensory and children in general. And so, but that's a lot of special ed, to be honest. I mean, ADHD is a very similar process. It's a rating scale. There's no blood test for any of this stuff. It doesn't feel like science sometimes, but there is science there for sure on how we at least treat it, because it is in the brain. So yeah, there's a piece of assessment that includes subjective, but there's also, you need to have some objective pieces. And that's where observation data and other data from the classroom is really important to like support your 3 prongs and your reason for saying that the student has an educational impact and needs, OT is never a specially designed instruction, or rarely. It's a related service. So it's going to provide services related to the other special education services. So the OT had done that rating scale and said that they did an observation, but didn't really summarize the observation and didn't have any supporting data. it was very thin in the parents' opinion. So they filed for an IEE just in OT. They didn't disagree with the rest of the evaluation. Which is nice when parents do this, by the way, when they tell us exactly which piece of the evaluation they disagree with. Often we will get a request for an IEE, an independent educational evaluation, that it doesn't state what they're disagreeing with, which makes it hard for the district to have, they don't know which pieces they need to defend or get an IEE for. So I appreciate that part. But the district
could also be hard too, in the sense that when we send a kid out for an IEE, a private evaluation to someone who is not a school OT, you're going to get a different recommendation for what is needed in a school setting. You could get a different recommendation for what is needed in a school setting, or recommendations that the school's not going to do.
I mean, I will say that is 100% my experience, is that the medical OT outpatient therapeutic model is going to see this very differently than a school-based OT. Agree. Thank you for saying that.
I have a question about IEEs. Is there any sort of regulation of like you have to see the environment, or is it like fully clinical objective?
It kind of depends on the situation, because sometimes you could say, well, we'll have somebody from another school district or an ESD employee so that you have a school-based, another opinion in that regard. But so it's really kind of individualized, because Stephen, do you know what? We've done IEEs, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So
I'm following mostly. We're doing great.
The thinking about that piece, like, you're going to be it when Leanne said it's really nice because they said it's only this one part of the eval. They have to tell you in their request what they disagree with. And then based on that, you guys agree. And the school usually says, hey, here's a list of some folks that we recommend. Do you have somebody? And so you kind of mutually agree on someone beforehand. So it just sort of depends on what the situation is.
What you looked like you were going to say something.
I know, I stopped.
She censored herself.
I stopped myself.
Well, and I think Anna asked, can the school require certain things from the IEE provider? Not really. Like, it's nice if you can.
I guess, and I wasn't necessarily saying like, can the school do it, but like, is there like in the like wax of IEEs, what do the regulations look like around them, or are there any?
Not very much.
I'm going to use Leanne's word. They're very thin. they have to say what they disagree with, and then the district has so many days to respond. I don't even remember off the top of my head. And then you've got to find a provider. What the district can do is put in their contract that they're going to do certain things. So you can say, hey, if we're going to pay you to do this, we want to make sure that this assessment is done, or that you consider this, or so they could say you need to come and see him. But you also then have to have an OT who's willing to leave their private space, leave their practice, miss other clients, and come in and see him in the school setting, which is not, if they're a private-based therapist, their expertise either.
And there's no rule that what's recommended through an IEE process is what the team at the school then implements. You just have to consider all that information and bring it into your evaluation and IEP. So I don't know if it is worth your time to try and manage your IEE. It's more about bringing it back and talking about it and making team decisions from there. But
I think you actually don't want to manage it. I think it's probably making sure that you're staying objective, and to the parents' concern is that you don't manage it. So we had a situation recently where the family sent us a list and said, we want to do this IEE and we want these assessments done. And I went, whoa, we're not the expert doing the the cognitive. We want that psychiatrist to make the recommendation on what assessments they want to give. And so we are not actually dictating any of it. If you see something and you need to meet and go have an observation done, then we want them to recommend that, not it coming from us. We don't want to bias that.
I agree. I mean, you're getting basically a medical second opinion, and the idea is that it would be not influenced by all these other factors, that it's fresh, that it's clean, and then you take it all back. So the parents filed for or requested an IEE at public expense, which is how it works. And the district, I think, was probably, filling in things that I don't know for sure, but was probably trying to avoid. So the district has two options. Once they get an IEE request, they either get to accept it or they deny it, and then they need to file due process. And I think the district was trying to kindly not file due process, but also deny it. And that's
a razor thin margin. I feel like it's like, no, just trust us.
It was basically, we stand behind that this OT evaluation was appropriate. We will not be granting you an IE, but then they used a lot of other language and didn't actually do the second part, which is file the due process. So,
dang, I feel like that's already a bummer because there's so few things that are black and white. And that one is just so black and white. It's like, darn.
We have, though, talked about, I remember you saying this, Darcy, I don't remember when this was, but we've talked before about like sometimes we overuse IEEs because then we are like discounting the knowledge and expertise of our staff.
I completely agree. And I think sometimes we do it to avoid the due process.
That's both. Yeah. We've seen that it's not a comfortable thing to be the ones that file due process. So especially when we have a lot of turnover in special education directors, like it takes a long amount of time in the field before you're willing to go, I'm going to stand on this and I'm going to file due process. So I do think having turnover like we have is part of that problem. But
and once you get a due process, it's lose-lose. Nobody's happy about the outcome.
Yeah. So I don't know. Sometimes IEEs can be overused, but I haven't found in my own experience that denying them is worth it that often. I would definitely want to do it if a family was requesting like every chance they get. Don't they get to do it once a year?
Once per eval.
Okay. So that if they were doing it once every eval, I would maybe go, this is a little much because it does get very costly. Often we have to pay for the travel and reimburse the family for that. And and we don't have, like in our region, it's not super simple to send somebody for those types of evaluations. So I think, the other option might have been what Darcy said. Like we have encouraged districts a couple of times to say, how about an OT from another district does an evaluation? That's a nice little remedy, but the district didn't do those
getting your
things.
Outside opinion, but
right.
It's okay.
But you're not sending them to another part of the state where you have to get hotels and flights or whatever, potentially. And at the end of the day, you're keeping it about what does the kid need, not we're going to pay for the most expensive evaluation. And still, we won't be able to do the things that the person recommended that we do in our particular setting and our zip code. So, but definitely you got to do one of the two. You've got to either do the IE or file the due process. And they didn't. So they did. Did imagine you guys know they lost on that. Yes. Okay. No, in this case, I'm sorry. The kid already had an IEP, but they didn't get to, maybe I'm not sure. Maybe they did hold the IEP, but I think the parents filed right away. As soon as the eval was over. Okay. They asked for an IE right away. So, but also once this did go to a judge, the district was obviously, they didn't follow their timelines, it was a procedural error. But looking at the evaluation that the OT did, the court also found that it was an insufficient report based on the fact that it was very thin. Like they did the rating scales, but then they never really explained how that impacted the classroom or had any classroom data, or even talked about what the educational, service would be, or what, exactly. Like they definitely
do they qualify in OT as a related service, and they had a goal.
Yes, but it was no, they had it as a supplementary aid and service too. So training for the teacher around sensory, which is, again, like going back to sensory, we don't really have like a very set model of what that could look like or should look like in a school. It's not a very good, like, we're going to pull your kid out and work on their sensory processing. That's not a very good plan. So often it looks like teaching the teacher to like give them that wiggle seat, or, have these certain accommodations available, or recognize when a child is getting overstimulated and maybe they need just a break. Whatever that looks like for that kid, it can be part of their behavior plan. Sometimes Anna knows that sensory comes up in behavior plans all the time. There's just so many different ways to address it, but this OT did not have enough information in the evaluation for it to actually hold up, even if they hadn't messed up the timeline. It still wouldn't have been a legally defensible report because it was missing those pieces.
You told us the answer.
I know I did. But that's because that's it. Like, it doesn't get off the ground because of all of that.
So essentially,
it's over?
Essentially,
they said go back and do another OT eval.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially, their eval was like rating scale, and then they said doesn't need support, and that was it.
Which goes back to my initial like concern of like, that seems a little unscientific. And you're like, yeah, well, they're supposed to do like classroom observations and all these things. But if all they're doing is the sensory report, then what I'm hearing is I'm justified in thinking those sensory reports aren't quite enough, because that's just not. Step one.
Yeah.
Shocking. I heard that I was correct.
Oh, good God.
So we're going to hear about that all day.
Another thing that the judge mentioned is that the OT did not review the prior IEPs. So there's a piece on our prior written notice that says that you considered all of these pieces when you were making your decisions. And it said that they had reviewed the prior IEPs, but then when asked during the trial, or the OT admitted that they hadn't read the prior IEPs. Like, those little things start to matter when you get to the point of due process. I mean, it's not little. It's important that you do a file review. Like, if you say you did a file review, that you actually did a file review. Yes.
Lies are never a good thing. Not a good
never a good thing.
I want to stand on this, though, because I could see the OT not being the one writing the prior written notice, and it being a school psychologist or someone else who probably did, or other team members who did. And so that ends up on the prior written notice. So I wouldn't say necessarily like it was an intentional or blatant lie from the OT who didn't write that. They obviously didn't do a comprehensive evaluation specific to their specialty.
Mm-hmm. And the observations were not well documented. It just makes me think, as a supervisor of a lot of professionals, and what needs to be in our reports for legally defensible. If we're ever sitting on that stand and having to defend things, like, you want to do a thorough job, and what pieces are critical. And the file review part is critical. The observations are critical. Including the parents' input is critical. and then explaining the testing results, not just putting numbers on paper, but explaining what they mean in relationship to that individual student. Those are important, and they didn't, and the court found that they didn't do those 4 pieces. So,
and if there's one thing I'm taking away from like all of this, just not necessarily just even this case, it's the attention to detail that is required in special education.
I know.
Holy cow. Like the amount of times in my day, in my job, where I'm just like, doesn't matter. Let's move fast, break things, and we'll figure it out as we go along. How quickly would I be sued in the special education world? Because it seems like a case of, I don't know, I'm going to speculate wildly on a situation I know nothing about, potentially overworked. Like the OT could be like spread a little bit too thin. Could be negligence. Could be incompetence. Could be had an off day. Yeah, 100%. Right. It could be any one of those things, and all of that could have been avoided if they had just followed essentially what sounds like a checklist.
I think a piece of that too.
Go ahead.
I think a piece of that too is when you, as a director, if you think about that and you're looking over the OT report and asking, like, what are the parents' concerns, right? Because they didn't get addressed. So the only time all those little things add up is when you're in due process because something's broke in the relationship, right? So the district is saying, I'm willing to stand behind this OT eval, but we really didn't address sensory, which is what the parents were asking for in the first place. Like, did we or did we not? Like, that seems like a pretty easy question, kind of filtering that out too. So that's a bummer because I think that the director put this staff member in a really hard spot. Right? Because now we're sitting here looking at it going, well, maybe they're incompetent.
Yeah.
Versus the director
I did say
going,
speculate
hey,
wildly with no information.
Let's make sure that we, address whatever that is.
Yeah.
I definitely think that in this situation, it would have been easy to go, hey, whatever we did wasn't actually meeting the standard that we should have for this family and for this kid, to do a more comprehensive, because no, the answers aren't wrong. It's the process and the communication, just like Darcy said. And I don't think that we've been told many, many times at law conferences, there is no perfect paperwork. Like, everybody's paperwork is lacking in some area. It's not the paperwork that is going to save you. It's your intentions. And if you did not follow the intention of addressing the parents' concerns, that is going to always be an issue. So, and also the other reason I chose the case I told you is because sensory motor is so poorly defined of what that should look like. So I understand that the OT is like, I don't even know what this should look like. And maybe doesn't have a lot of training in that area.
Is that because that area is newer? Like, why is sensory motor? Okay.
It's newer, yes. And it's a little bit disputed. Just people don't always agree when I've gone to conferences about if it's a standalone or if it's a direct service or if it's an accommodation.
I've had a conversation with the school psych in the last 5 years that didn't believe executive functioning was a thing.
Yeah.
So I would say not everyone's in agreement that even should be considered a service.
Okay. And then that's where I was thinking, Lan, you're going first, but then you started talking about like, well, I'm not sure where it should land. So it's a little bit contentious as like where it should sit in the special education world. And just from my own experience, like I could see how someone would make the leap of, you've got this kid who is just dysregulated. I was about to use a very unacademic term, dysregulated. And so me pushing on his his heel and knee to apply deep pressure before bed is going to help this. Like, it does seem, I think at one point I used the term witchcraft when we were like, it just seems and purely anecdotal, it does help, right? I mean, that's not a scientific thing to say for sure, because it's just one individual experience. OT was a game changer for our kid and his sensory input needs, and there's some developmental stuff there too, like when he like matured through that helped for sure. But I could see how people would be skeptical of something that, and I guess I didn't realize it was newer in the SPED world. Maybe you don't have the answer to this question. How new? Like, when did sensory motor first come on the scene?
No, I definitely don't have the answer to that question, because honestly, honestly, all adults, every person has sensory needs. And
right. Like, always been there. Right. But
yeah. But we learn to accommodate ourselves. Like, if I get overstimulated, I'm, going to turn the music down or something, but kids don't know how to do that. So it takes an adult to be able to recognize what they need and help them advocate for that in their future. So I think people buy into it's real because teachers see it on a regular basis. It's just not full agreement on what to call it and how to define it and what it should look like.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I guess I was just wondering when first people started, like, when it like entered like academic conversation around being a need that we should address,
We, for our categories, like, we look at the DSM-5, and there's been arguments about it being in the DSM-5. So that is what I will look up. It usually it's listed as a observable, like, part of other conditions like autism or so forth. Gotcha. So the standalone part is the part that's been argued, but it's been in the science actually for a long time.
Oh, all right.
Google says, take this with a grain of salt. Google said like after 2010 is when sensory started becoming a thing in schools. But
so if you were to like give a grace period on either side of that, because I'm sure it was talked about way before that, and I'm sure there are people, probably not people listening to this, who are like, oh, I didn't even know that was but you're right. It does kind of check out. Like, no one knows sensory overload better than like parents with little kids, right? Because they're just loud and chaotic, insane. And so, I think the term overstimulated too has gotten kind of mainstream. Like, I've seen that more recently, just outside academia. So, yeah, I guess sometimes when you guys say, well, it's relatively new, every now and then you guys say that and you're talking about something from like the early 90s, 30 plus years ago.
How long does it take for something that's scientifically been talked about to get into our public schools?
Right. Yeah. Well, not even,
it's new in the public school setting. It's not new in science.
Well, and anything like takes that time to permeate too, right? I remember talking to a friend of mine who was a nurse, and he's like, it's crazy. Like, medical, like, best practice always feels like it's like 15 years behind. Like, they're always kind of like, they've got these emergent things, and it takes time for it to permeate into the actual practices. And it's like, that seems insane for the medical field. Education, I can understand a little bit, but in that med field, it's scary. So, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry I didn't set you guys up for the big mystery, but if you miss a timeline like that, it's kind of a no-brainer what happened.
But it doesn't mean that it was a fundamental fate error.
No,
because
it was a procedural
deadline and just get a procedural error.
Yeah, it was a procedural error. It wasn't a fate error.
Yeah, it's a good reminder to
so
mind
they just made them,
right?
Yeah, they made them finish the IEE and do it again. So that was kind of the outcome. Thanks for tuning in to Spedsplaining. If you've got questions or thoughts about today's episode, we'd love to hear from you. Head over to our links where you can drop your questions, join the conversation, and connect with us. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode if you found it helpful. Until next time, keep on learning and stay curious.